Okay, welcome people. This is our post-COVID or intra-COVID seminar, as it turns out, with the recurrence in Victoria. I'm Grahame, the President of ACRA. We've been getting on these webinars over the last month to help our membership get informed on industry issues. Today's seminar will be, it's not a seminar, sorry, it's a panel of industry experts and participants talking about the impact of COVID and what we've learnt out of it. Caroline McConnachie comes with some good history. She's with Max Build as their General Manager. Her accountabilities at the business include the overall business strategy, setting goals for growth, managing finance. She's a key link between the senior corporate team and the project teams and has a proven track record for strong relationship building that includes with clients, stakeholders, suppliers, consultants and service providers. She drives the people and culture agenda through overseeing the day-to-day operations. Under her stewardship, the organisation has sustained an annual average growth of 45% since 2012. That is a cracking pace. Well done. They run 6 to 8 sites. They're ISO 9001, ISO 14001, ISO 4801 certified, and they also have a 95% employee retention rate, and that's pretty good too. Caroline's initiated collaborations with the wider built environment sector. In 2019, MaxBuild partnered with the University of Sydney in the ARC Linkage Project, transforming housing, co-design guidelines for existing apartment buildings. It's a major research project due to commence in 2020 and has a 3-year completion. It's meant to explore the adaptation of multi-dwelling buildings in future. She's also recently been a keynote speaker at the Griffith University 2019 Strata Tile Conference, RISE, Transforming Aging Buildings, a Game Changer in Strata. We have to do that. There's a big stock out there of old buildings with poor design and dated design. Caroline will be our moderator for today, so I'll hand over to Caroline.
Yeah. Thank you, Grahame. That felt a bit like This Is Your Life. So thank you.
It was a little, sorry.
So I'm going to do a quick intro of everyone, and they're going to introduce themselves, so it'll be short and sharp. So we'll start with Mike Rutherford, who's the Director of Conspectus. Mike, give us a quick snapshot about you.
35 years industry experience. It's been gained both nationally and internationally, and I've been very fortunate to work in the arenas of product development and marketing, and also contracting and consultancy. So I've covered all 3 spheres in that, so I've been very fortunate.
Great, thanks Mike. Lorraine Duffy, GM of Hitech Industrial. Tell us about you.
Thanks Caroline. So Hitech's my 3rd career change, and they always say you have 3 careers. So hopefully, well, I have to say out front, no more. So my career has been predominantly in hospitality. I spent probably the first part of my life as a GM in hotels, accommodation hotels. From there, went in to head up the star rating scheme when it was run by the Auto Clubs of Australia. Then the CEO of the Accommodation Association, so all the accommodation venues throughout Australia, and most recently before Hitech, a few years ago now, Parking Australia. So the CEO of the Association for the Parking Industry. So I certainly have an affiliation with associations and certainly a big, strong love for associations.
Great, thanks Lorraine. Kieran Smith, the BDM at Freyssinet Australia in the Buildings and Remediation Division.
Thanks Caroline. Yeah, I'm also the current Vice President of ACRA, and I've worked in the remedial industry for the last 20 years, primarily in the repair and remediation of buildings, both in commercial and residential side.
Great, thanks Kieran. And Johnny Orr, Senior Materials Engineer at GHD.
Thanks Caroline. I've been working in the consultancy space for the last 19 years, mainly in the area of concrete inspection, durability and remediation work. And I have been a member of the ACRA WA branch here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Right, let's kick off with questions. So these questions are based on the survey that ACRA put out in May to the industry to field everyone's thoughts on how COVID had disrupted their businesses. So we're going to start with the first one about how did COVID-19 affect the way businesses were managed during this very disruptive period. I'm going to start with Lorraine as GM at Hitech. How did it impact how you manage the business?
Yeah, Caroline, it was, I mean, initially, like most people, it was a bit of a shock and obviously slowed down the business. And really, we looked across the business at our key elements and the things that we did. So we looked at our marketing, how we were going to be continuing that. We looked at our people. We looked at the actual operations. So how do our people cope in workspaces? And I think most of the people had answered the questions quite rightly. On site, we had to make a fair bit of changes. Obviously, shifts changed. So we were doing more night shifts just as the government introduced more flexibility in working arrangements. But a lot of things that were very focusing for us was really around our people. So we had to look at mental health, importantly their mental, their financial health as well. So we really, I suppose, leveraged on our EAP program, Employment Assistance Program, to make sure that the people that were in our working environment were able to cope because they had their partners at home, they had children at home predominantly, they might have been at home for lengthy periods of time, being stretched financially. So we really had to look at that. A lot of what we do is very high risk. We're working with ultra high pressure water. So we really wanted to ensure that when they were on site and when they were working, that they were focused on the job at hand and weren't distracted. So that EAP program, which was a cloud-based one, was quite integral for moving forward. I think key to it also was the fact that we had experienced in the past, and we might even talk about GFC, etc., later down the track, but for us it was really about ensuring that we had really good cash reserves, that the business was going to be able to cope through that time as well. So strategically for us, we looked at those operational areas, the marketing, the brand reputation, how we're going to start to market ourselves and let everybody know that we were still here, that we could let people know that our brand was still here, that we were out in the field, we were working responsibly. So we had to take 3 or 4 really key high-level parts of our business under consideration.
Yeah, brand reputation, you know, was so crucial during this time, and communication, full stop, was critical. We were talking just before we went online about COVID emails and how many came into our inboxes, but they were, you know, they started off as a trickle and then there were tons of them, but they were actually a very important way of reaching out and communicating responsibility and brand reputation. Kieran, did you want to add something to that? Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah, okay, there we go. Just make, we had a lot of people from our office working remotely and working from home, but we still had a couple of hundred guys out on site who had to go to work every day, so we had to make sure we maintained that connection, make sure they didn't feel isolated out there on site, and that they still had management and office support throughout the whole time they had to attend work every day.
Was there any need to reassure people, site guys about that it was still safe to be turning up to work whenever, you know, the government message was to be self-isolating?
Yeah, we were fortunate that we had sort of control of all of our sites. We were working as a head contractor on all of those areas, so we could put the controls in and made sure that the guys felt safe. And there was a lot of back and forth between us and the guys, and putting in what we needed to do to make sure they wanted to come to work every day.
Great. And Lorraine before talked about a cloud-based EAP system. We were all working in the cloud and online more, you know, now more than ever. Johnny, do you want to tell us a bit about how technology has been improved upon at GHD during this period?
Yes, Caroline. So the management in GHD, the first thing they did is to have a massive ramp up of the IT infrastructures. Just prior to the outbreak, the IT has been working like 24 hours a day to actually basically double the capacity of the normal IT flow to make sure that everyone is ready to do work at home. And there's also a lot of trial upgrade of the computer system, more online reporting and document system to make that process smoothly. And also in terms of site work, WA initially have a regional border culture, so that make inspection very difficult. The strategy we have been adopting is to utilizing some of our local regional office people with the use of drone or 3D scanning technology to help people visualizing the condition on site without actually physically being on site. So those are actually been helping us, and now we can see that this pandemic effects, now people actually getting more used to and adopting the new technology to provide that visual impression and eliminate the need of doing inspection.
Okay, great. I just I just realised I didn't introduce Brian before. My apologies. Brian Kaye is the technical consultant at Duoguard and also representing Victoria here today. Brian, could you give us a bit of tell us about you first, and then the Victorian experience?
That's all right, Caroline. Yeah, look, I've been in the industry for 27 years as a contractor, consultant, manufacturing, and now as actually a supply company. So basically with concrete remediation, cathodic protection. I'm also a member of the Victorian Committee of ACRA. I'm on the committee of the Applicated Technical Group and also the ACA. So yeah, enjoy concrete repair basically. But yeah, from Victoria, well, that's an interesting comment. As you're all aware that, we're experiencing a surge in the coronavirus cases, hence the state is in lockdown at the moment. So I live on the New South Wales border. I'm actually in New South Wales for the people that are listening, but at the moment it is lockdown. So we are hence checking on all vehicles are being stopped at the border and checking their credentials and where they live. And from my understanding this morning, there have been numerous people actually turned around and sent back to Victoria. So, but I'm sure you'll see more of that on the news tonight. But in regards to Victoria, there's a lot of positives in actual fact that, the Victorian government has, or infrastructure projects are actually going extremely strong with Met Rail and Vic Roads. And there's a lot of other projects that they're obviously proceeding. The problem is the multi-strata works and commercial buildings are extremely slow. And have been delayed, but there are some good signs in the near future depending on what happens now with this second wave. As a material supply business, we haven't at this stage been seriously affected due to that we've got some major projects throughout various states in Australia. However, we have actually been impacted by the importation of products and materials, and obviously freight delays, and obviously the huge increases in those as well. So it's been extremely difficult to manage and plan and coordinate and schedule with our contractors, but at this stage we've done reasonably well. However, we'll see what happens in the near future.
Thank you, Brian. And Mike from Queensland, can you talk to the specific state experience there?
From a Queensland point of view, the restrictions, COVID-19 restrictions, had an unintended upside in saying that social distancing and the restrictions on face-to-face meetings assisted some businesses improving their efficiency and cost savings through the likes of time, travel and consumables, etc. A lot of business became more productive with greater numbers working from home. Being forced to work from home actually highlighted how effective it can be with better productivity, creativity and better work-life balance. As I said before, it's also reduced overhead costs, tolls, fuel, electricity, car parking. The impacts have resulted in change, and we feel it'll be the big change for many businesses that will probably stay in place in a lot of instances. And also the way business handles site works. now we have safe work methods and they're all stating how to handle infection control. So we've got a whole new ballgame that we're playing with here, which I think once again will carry on post-COVID.
And Lorraine, your business works interstate. How have you been impacted?
Yeah, Caroline, I think it's really, people have seen a bit of a risk, and of course now in Victoria that's really exacerbated that. We would work generally across the eastern seaboard. However, we're seeing that there is an element of cocooning state-wise and saying, well, you know, we really want to work with people in our own state in case there is another spike, again, as we've seen. So there's the opportunity there for us to work interstate, and then we could have to try and ferry people backwards and forwards. So we found that our work has been predominantly, certainly since COVID, in New South Wales, and we've been focusing in New South Wales. And to be fair, the state government here has really wanted to fast track things and has kept the construction and some of that major civil work going. I mean, there was a whole focus on congestion and roads pre-COVID. So we had the North Connects, the M8, the M5, the Central Metro, all of those infrastructures had to be finished. So there's been a real push to get those done on time, which has helped us because obviously we've been working in some of those big projects as well.
And then, thank you. And then in terms of operationally, tendering for, so Grahame, you tend to work in the strata space. How has tendering been affected by social distancing? Grahame, oh, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I thought you directed that to Lorraine. Yeah, for us, a lot of our work doesn't require the site attendance for our role, but tendering for new works coming up in the strata space has taken a bit of a slowdown. Strata and commercial buildings, pretty much like Brian's experienced. On the infrastructure side, those jobs kept running, which was okay, but there will be a knock-on, I believe, the next 6 months while people have still got their hands in their pockets and still got leaky buildings or falling, decisions will have to be made in the near future. Yeah, so there were adjustments. Social distancing, yes, the usual cursory handshakes and whatnot, a distant thing. Yeah, we've all got to adjust to a new reality.
Yeah. And Kieran, what about site work? What were the operational changes?
Look, yeah, we experienced it. We were lucky, not too much of a loss of productivity by implementing the new social distancing as much as we could on site. Where we did notice a big difference was the tenders and tendering opportunities that were coming through over the last couple of months. The remedial industry, we're pretty heavily reliant on getting out onto site and looking and touching and feeling and being able to work out what, where can we install access. Do we need to use scaffold? Do we need to use different type of access systems? Where can we put that? How much space is there? How do we get there? How much effect are we going to have on the buildings around us? So it's pretty hard to put any sort of real tender submission together without being able to get onto site. So I think that not being able to have those site meetings, coupled with the sort of unknown on how long the material is going to take to come in. Certain parts of our industry rely heavily on imported products. I know earlier, sort of in April, May, there was anyone's guess on how long this was going to go and how long was it going to take to get product out of Asia or Europe. Was it going to be 6 weeks, 16 weeks, 6 months, 9 months? So not knowing when you could get product in and not being able to get onto site saw a lot of our tenders being held off. I know in the last month, we've seen a fair few now start coming through. There's a little bit more surety about when stuff's going to come in, and we can all get on site now and have a look and work out what's what. So yeah, we did notice a big slowdown in the new tenders coming through and starting.
What about productivity on site during this period? Have you found that slowed down?
We lose a little bit more time sort of in the mornings and afternoons when things are getting, from a hygiene point of view, and some distancing and not being able to get as many guys into the same space. We did have 1 or 2 sites where we did experience a big slowdown in getting to site in the morning. 1 or 2 guys allowed into a personnel hoist where normally there would have been 10 or 12. And if it takes 10 or 15 minutes to get up and back with 2 guys and you times that by 20, suddenly we had to sort of stagger some work time so that we didn't have 20 guys waiting for an hour to get up in the lift and then come down again in the afternoon.
Yeah, we certainly had a bit of a slowdown in productivity with things like only 1 person being able to use a lift when the lift was our only, sole access, or only 2 people were allowed in an apartment. And that's if we were allowed in the apartment in the first place. So there was definitely a time when we weren't even, accessing the internals to do work. So there was definitely a shift in our programming during that period. Did you find that any projects were stopped during this time? Did any did clients pull the pin at all?
We had one project which was put on hold. The client didn't have any revenue coming in, so their budget from the year got extremely affected.
Yeah.
So it's been put on hold. On the flip side, we had a couple of projects that had some very stringent work hours because they were on commercial properties in the city with some very high-profile tenants. Some of those buildings actually got locked, and everyone had to stay away from the building and work from home. So it worked in our advantage that we got to suddenly, instead of working for a few hours a day, we were allowed to work from 7 till 5, which manages to get some of those projects finished ahead of time, which is fortunate because a lot of those buildings now people are really streaming back into them in the city.
And the government's change in when we could work on site, was that a boon for anyone here, for you, Kieran or Johnny?
Oh, for us, as a consultants, as I mentioned, we are a lot of people are already working from home, so that is actually less impact to us in terms of productivity. People may have to work a longer hour, but we actually found that the productivity actually increases. People are more focused on the work, and we don't actually see any decrease in productivity.
Yeah, we were fortunate because most of our projects at the moment are commercial, so the buildings were empty. I don't know if that had a reverse effect on builders who are doing a lot of residential work, being that so many people were home when they would have easily been gone, whether that caused some issues there.
Well, I found that this time was incredibly unpredictable in how people responded. We assumed in the height of panic that people didn't want us to continue in their apartment blocks, but in fact they wanted us to hurry up and continue and work faster, harder, so that they could get their apartment block handed back or all done. So yeah, it was a very strange, unusual time. We had tenders that we won within 24 hours of receiving the tender. So there was just a strange speeding up process, and then a very much a slowing down in other ways. So this push-pull that seemed to be happening in this space. Did anyone else find that jobs acted strangely during this time?
No? Only access to sites, a lot more stringent on obviously the distancing. New South Wales had a great system where we actually inducted online, and we actually had an app that we could actually sign in, sign off, which I thought was amazing. And a lot less grief when you just get to the security gates. But other than that, no.
Great. And things like cost. Cost is with materials coming in. Is that an issue for us going forward, Brian?
Oh, well, it is at the moment now. Things were coming back to a little bit of normality, but with what's happening now in Victoria, I've already been informed that importing into customs into Victoria there could be some delays. The costs, as I said before, that have gone up 5 times, the costs, and we're not actually forwarding that on to our clients. We're absorbing those, which they don't know. The other thing is too that obviously we've got to be careful of if your materials are, manufactured in China or in America at the moment. From what I've been told, it's going to be very, very difficult very shortly to get those products here into Australia. So I did have an email yesterday in regard to looking at shipping movements, but you've got to, look at 8 weeks minimum just with shipping movements. So yeah, it poses a big problem in the near future.
Mm.
And I believe all manufacturers and suppliers are in the same boat.
Absolutely. I think there will be some contractors out there with current projects hoping that there aren't going to be price increases as a result of COVID-19, and potentially looking at their contract clauses to see what needs to be amended, or what requests need to be made. We certainly reviewed terms such as force majeure and frustration during the height of COVID-19, and I have actually seen new contracts now have those clauses in there for that do relate to a pandemic. So just more protection around that exposure, and that's in terms of cost and also time. So extension of time being allowed for, and who pays for those delays. In terms of the tender pipeline, does everyone feel that it's remained the same during this period? I know we did briefly touch upon it, but Grahame, did you want to share some thoughts there?
Yeah, we had a couple of commercial scanning jobs in Melbourne that fell over effectively. The orders were imminent, and that was in like the week before the shutdown, the first one. So we mobilised one of our guys and got him down there with the equipment ready and waiting. They just vaporised, unfortunately. So we spent the month researching and waiting. On the strata side, that's a large part of our business as well. A lot of those, it was the hands in pockets effect, waiting to see what shocks were coming through due to the shutdowns. I mentioned a little bit earlier that I think that will start to ease as the occupants of buildings realise that they've or force the issue. If there's leaks, those leaks need to be fixed. If there's safety issues, bits falling off concrete cancer, then that needs to be fixed. I would like to think in the next 6 months, the sort of slowdown of the last 3 and 4 will ease.
Mike, as a consultant and seeing the projects at the beginning stages, what do you see coming through the tender pipeline?
Well, three different avenues. Like tendering, I think what's been highlighted is there's going to be more reliance on better scoping in tender documentation. I'm saying that I think this can potentially drive our industry towards greater documentation, more defined documentation, improve technical standards, and that would cause less variations on site. We seem to have a situation where one of the first things happening on site is a variation goes in through lack of clarity in a scope that's in a tender. And in relation to tendering, one of the biggest impacts that's been felt in Queensland is simply the fact that Brisbane to Cairns is further than Brisbane to Melbourne. It's a big state. The availability of flights, it means that contractors have had to forego tender briefings and site visits, tender meetings, because of the inability to be able to get there. The other impacts from a contractor point of view is the cost of doing work away from home. Like staff now don't fly in, fly out. They have to drive in, drive out. You can be 24 hours behind the wheel going out to somewhere like Mount Isa, but you can't get a flight on regional sites. It also impacts the quality of life of the contractor's personnel. They're away from home for extended periods of time, and that family and work balance is just not there. And on the materials, Kieran mentioned being able to get product. Well, we've also got situations where we can't get product to the manufacturer in Australia because we can't get the raw materials. In things that we need urgently, like if we need anodes urgently, we can't air freight because there's no planes in the air. So it has been a pretty trying time for us.
Mm. And Johnny, as well as consultant, what do you see? Do you see the pipeline being affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, I think initially there's some delay in issuing of tender, particularly from the government because of the changing and the adoption of the remote working. But we see more and more project tendering coming out, particularly with the government have announced the stimulus package. One of the major one is about refurbishment of all the public housing work. and that's coming on the pipeline. And also in terms of our workload, we actually have have more work and have more the kind now here, particularly with government, has been putting pressure on us to deliver quickly in order to get into the market quickly for construction. So that actually, in terms of the workload, we actually see an increase in workload, and we also see in the short medium term, the government is going to announce and put more tendering to boom up the economy.
Mm-hmm. In the residential space, in the existing structure space, do we think that there will be more compliance-driven works for the foreseeable future? Grahame, that might be one for you.
There we go. Possibly. I mean, in compliance in terms of the usual pressures when people are made aware of a risk, it gets tabled into the strata files. They then have the uncomfortable decision they've got to spend some money. That's often our role, to give them that news, and getting the work done is the difficult thing. I don't think that will change just due to COVID. It's the management of resources on site, either during the diagnostic phase or the execution phase, that will change. So we will need to put in clauses like force majeure, as you said earlier, things like that to protect the contractors, because those things aren't within the contractor's risk. I don't think there's any direct COVID-related compliance things that I can think of. It'll be mainly how the process runs in future.
We often hear that Remedial is recession-proof, but I don't think it's necessarily pandemic-proof. What's the difference between the current recession that we're now in and, say, the GFC? How may we not be as recession-proof as we were in previous downturns? Lorraine, would you like to share some thoughts here?
So, Caroline, I think the GFC, I mean, Hitech was obviously there. We were there in 2007, 8, doesn't seem that long ago. But I think the important part then was, as opposed to now, that was a banking, it was a fiscal style of recession. What we are experiencing now is forced upon us. So for those that want to work, we are being restricted in some ways as to where we can work. The recession was really about saying, well, you know, it's a financial issue and a financial situation that was happening. So the pandemic that we're having now, it's really about saying, well, this is forced on you. So you can't work, and you may not be able to work in Victoria if you really wanted to. So quite a different scenario, and it is really cocooning people in that way. Plus, I mean, I suppose the GFC, as I said prior, it really taught everyone now that we needed to have that cash reserves and have that there as well. So it is quite a different scenario. And to be fair, the GFC was a couple of years in bringing everything back to its fore, and it took a little while for the economy and for the industry to get back. I think that COVID is something that's going to have a bit more of a rapid response, because the stimulus packages are probably double what we experienced back in 2007, 2008. The government's really pushing funds up to 10% of GDP into us getting back on track. So it's a much more rapid return, hopefully.
So essentially this one is the fact that there's been the health risk as well as the financial impact. So we have been forced, our behaviour and how we play in business has been forced to change as a result of the pandemic, and therefore in this recession how we have to operate. But hopefully we have a faster recovery because of those stimulus packages that we've seen. I'll talk more about the packages in a second. Mike, what are the lessons to take away from the GFC that we can implement in this recession?
Well, I don't know. I think the Queensland attitude is that GFC, could kill your wallet and your bank account, but it's not like a pandemic that can kill you anyway. I think lessons learned out of GFC. I don't really know whether there's a great deal that we can do about it. You know, like our hands have been forced in many, many ways. Like we have a lot of government tenders being pushed out there at the moment, but they're all stalling. Are we going to have the finances to be able to commit to them to work all the way through? I think a lot of tenders that have been put out are probably an indication of what they need for budgets. And that's sort of been crossed loud and clear from a lot of government departments.
Mm. Brian, what was your experience of GFC, and how do you think this is different?
I think what Lorraine actually covered it quite well, actually, but also my comments about the tenders, like we're hoping that the government, stimulus packages and increase in funds for various sectors comes through. They're very, very slow. Something Johnny said there before about investigations or inspections and condition assessments. That's going to slow the industry down as well. But it is forced upon us, unfortunately, and it is what it is.
Mm. And going back to government stimulus packages, Johnny, you talked about in WA, they're doing public housing refurbishment packages. We've also got the home builder package. I'm wondering if that has impacted anyone's business in a positive sense in Remedial. That's a resounding no. So it's a very particular package. Kieran, do you want to explain what home builder is and why it's not really fitting our mould?
Look, I just know from a personal experience, a family member was looking at it, and it was pretty hard to qualify for because your property had to be fairly moderately priced for Sydney. That not working again? Is that better?
Yeah.
It's just a pretty difficult package to qualify for. I don't know the exact numbers, but a fairly moderately priced house, when you consider Sydney house prices, fairly moderate combined income, and then a fairly big spend on the housing. So I don't know anyone. I know a few people who have looked at it. I don't know anyone who's qualified or sort of even just close to qualified.
Yeah. Yes. No. It's a tricky one because you have to be earning 125 as a single or 200 as a couple. Your property can't be worth more than 1.5, and the renovation has to be over 150, between 150 and 750. So very specific, and then it has to start within before December. You have to sign the contract. So it requires lots of a very fast DA approval, et cetera, or strata bylaw approval. So yeah, very challenging for the remedial space. Lorraine, what about other government changes from COVID, such as Fair Work Act provisions? Has that had an impact?
Yeah, I think, there's been a lot of flexibility, and the one thing that I suppose the positive, if there is one out of COVID, apart from all the other, work-life balance positives, is the fact of the relaxing of some of the legislation. I think we've really seen that things and legislation that would normally take months and years to go through, all of a sudden it's been, well, we have to fast track that. We've got to scramble to get that done. So certainly around, workplace relations, around flexible working hours, conditions around working at nights. We've really seen that fast track, it's been great. And I think this is a good lesson for us all. And I mean, certainly as a voter, we'd be saying, why do governments take so long to do things when in fact we can fast track all this legislation? So I know in New South Wales there were orders brought through to ensure that workers could work public holidays, weekends, our team could work at night time, and these are things that really were very good positives that have come out of this, as well as I think the New South Wales government, as far as stimulus is concerned, like Johnny was saying, there's a lot of new projects that are certainly on the agenda that are being brought forward, which will hopefully help the industry and help everybody. There's where we were looking at the road and transport before, now we've moved towards dams, and we're looking at renewables and other things that the government's trying to bring forward.
Yeah, that's great. And Brian, what about in Victoria? We're in a stage 3 lockdown. What's the government? How's the government assisting construction?
Well, as I said before, there's a number of tenders out. The Victorian, they're fast tracking 7 construction projects at the moment worth over $1 billion. to create employment and obviously boost the economy. Lorraine just mentioned there the hydro or dams. That's very, very similar. We're still in a drought situation in a number of areas, and from my understanding in the water industry, there is a lot of new structures as well as remediation. They're looking at a lot of the council reservoirs and watercourses as well. So yeah, look, the tenders requests have been strong, but unfortunately, like what I've heard this morning, that there's a lot of uncertainties, so no real commitment at the moment. But there have been a lot of tenders out.
Mm. And do we think with the new construction in terms of the residential space and commercial space, you know, when the current projects are completed, they're describing it as the valley of death is what's ahead. Do we think that that's then going to have an impact on the existing structure space? Kieran, you might have some comments on that.
Something interesting we found is that a few of our commercial clients are focusing on their funds now to the internals of the building and facilities, end of trip facilities and lobbies and meeting spaces, because they're quite concerned that the tenant that had 7 floors of the building might only want 3 floors now, because so much of the workforce are going to work from home or work remotely. So they're trying to capitalise and make sure they get as much of their revenue, and maybe some of the remedial projects that are important but not urgent to be done this year can be held off for a year or two, because the funds that were set aside for that are now trying to encourage people to come back into the city and come back into the building.
Mm. Do you think that cities will return to what they were like beforehand?
Sorry, Caroline, you just broke up on me there.
Do you think that cities will return to what they were beforehand? Or have we permanently changed and disrupted?
Look, I think there's a big spread. Some of the clients that we work for or tenants are expecting to have their people home until December. They've got some issues about forcing people back onto public transport, and whether that's an appropriate duty of care for their employees that they have to get onto public transport. There's just as many of companies out there that are telling their employees now that there's no need to stay home and you're expected back in the office. So I think there will be a shift, but maybe not as much as what we all thought a month or two ago when everybody was working from home and thought this might be the new normal. Yeah.
In terms of staffing, I'm interested to see what everyone thinks about how requirements for staffing are going to change. I know during COVID there were definitely in our industry pay cuts and stand downs, and then we've had for people that have to travel, that's been restricted. So are we going to see changes in the requirements of how we staff projects? Will we see localize, satellite offices, say for instance with Hitech? Might there be a Queensland business set up so that we have that, so you can work around these restrictions?
Yeah, Caroline, it's, as our people have certainly been in the office for most of the time over the last few months. I think for us as a business, and maybe in, the broader sense, I think Johnny touched on it before, the bigger focus on technology, so setting up satellite offices that people can remotely potentially work from. But as a business, for us, we're putting a much heavier focus on technology and robotics. I mean, we already do use robotics in our business, but certainly we've looked at a much more extended version of using robotics in the business, not because we don't want to have people, but we want to be able to upskill and cross-train our people towards something else, and also be able to, from an office environment, quite rightly, as I think we all discussed, was the fact of working from home or working remotely. Our car park here is next to a railway station, and there's probably 5% of the normal commuters that are here, so it's quite indicative amount of people that are still working from home. But yes, you're right, technology and the ability for us to use other avenues to be able to work interstate is certainly something that we will look at, and I think people overall will be looking at their whole business model and how they can better utilise their people and their resources. So, as I said, we're looking at how we can cross-skill and cross-train our people, because we did have to send people back home to New Zealand or back to Queensland because we have fly-in, fly-out people. So being able to say, well, the people that are here, because they are skilled, we can't just take them from maybe a labour hire. We do need to train them. So we need to make sure that we can cross-train our people as well and cross-skill them.
Mm. And do we think that we will be looking for a different type of job candidate going forward that is able to work more independently? Johnny, that might be one for you, with lots of people at GHD now working from home.
Yeah, we actually still employing people during that pandemic. As you said, yeah, we obviously looking for people with more adaptable for the change, for the change and use of technology and working remotely, independently. But one thing I also been able to see is, because now people have been more and more adapting to this web-based Zoom meeting and MS Team, we actually see releasing the boundary of everyone. So instead of working just within your own office, you are now able to work with your other colleague in other stage or other country. As a great example, today we have speaker from the different stage, which we probably have never done it before in ACRA. So actually, it's actually moving the boundary of the people working in different area. And that's, in addition to engaging people, you can also been thinking about working with other people on other stage to collaborate.
Mm. This is yes, it's an interesting time working from home and working remotely, and then, as you say, being able to then work across different states. Do you think we'll see the technology improve for collaborating remotely? One of the challenges I've heard is that training up the younger members of the team, when you're not, you're not having those incidental chats and just peering over a shoulder. Do we see that technology is going to have to improve so that we can do that? Kieran, you might, managing people, might have some thoughts there.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think as industry as a whole, we're notoriously slow for taking up new technologies, and as a whole. And I guess as I'm sitting as contractors, it's a huge change for us to think about having everybody working remotely. It has removed a bit of the stigma where, you had to be present and bums on seats to actually be doing something and producing and letting the boss see that you were doing work. I think it's going to be really tough to employ new, younger employees and be able to have them working from home almost immediately or thereabouts. There's a huge benefit in being able to work as part of a team and understand the company and its culture and how you fit into that team and how that works. And I think that could quickly be eroded if we're engaged from home and not being able to have some sort of team environment. So it's a challenge that we need to make sure everyone is safe and feels safe in coming to work and working how they are without being isolated as well. Working from home, it's a tough thing. I think it's when you do get the opportunity to do it, and you know that most people are going to try to be as productive as they can from home, because there is huge benefit in being able to work from home. As a younger person, that may not be as much of a driver. There may be some more distractions, so it's going to be a challenge. I think the older people we found working from home doesn't seem to be too much of an issue, but young guys, I think, will be. It is going to be tough.
Are you working more flexibly?
We're pretty fortunate that we can always. We're very much productivity based here as opposed to hours, so we can work. We've got a good flexibility within the business. Just making sure that the guys who are doing that are producing and being able to keep an eye and catch issues that would normally be caught very quickly if you're in an office-based environment versus possibly some problems that need to be solved if you're remote. We had to bring some rules in around. I mean, there was having a video chat as opposed to people keeping their videos off was one thing we had to sort of incorporate, because it's so much different being able to look someone and speak face to face than what it is just speaking on a speaker.
Yeah, I've heard of that. That definitely with Zoom we've had to, and Teams we've had to create an etiquette around how you behave on it, and certainly having your screen present so that people can see you. I think that's a really key point. While we're on this about working from home, which I see as definitely a silver lining, especially in the face of presenteeism that is, you know, alive and strong in construction. We will see more of that. I'm certainly in my business doing a lot more of my work from home and enjoying the benefits of not having that commute. I know of other consulting companies that are setting up satellite offices so that the team members that do want to still socialise and have that interaction, and they might have noisy flatmates, so working from home may not work for them. You know, they're going to be offering solutions like that, so they're getting the best out of their team, you know, and getting that productivity and the morale staying up. So silver linings. What are some of the other silver linings that we might see out of COVID-19? I think we talked about sickness. Kieran, as a cue.
We were talking yesterday that potentially it'd be interesting to see what the rate of real you know, lost time from sickness in our workforce is now that we're incorporating such higher hygiene standards and disinfection on sites, and everyone's, you know, washing their hands dozens of times a day. And I read recently the incidence of flu already is down dramatically from what it has been in the other years. So look, it's a possible upside that we may have less lost time from the other illness because of our hygiene standards.
Johnny, what about you? What do you think is one of the silver linings we'll have from this?
For me, it's more about work-life balance. There's good thing or bad thing. You can now like working with your families there. Whenever you want to have a relax, you can have some time with the family while you're still working. But on the other side, you have less of a delineation between the work and life. So sometimes you work longer. You don't have a very specific working hour. Sometimes you have to work late because sometimes you have to be. It's more flexible than before. But you're just losing that. Sometimes losing that control about the work-life balance.
Lorraine, what do you see as one of the silver linings?
I think there's the fact that from our business, and it seems quite diverse, is that people are really looking at diversifying, and they've had to look in their business during this time. You've had to go, okay, we're in this situation, what else can we do? And, you know, I'm sure we've all got examples of businesses that have really diversified and innovated. We've really focused on saying, well, you know, some of our suppliers have not been able to deliver because they're overseas, even to software, even to things like a support mechanisms where you might bring a support office that all of a sudden they're overseas, so they're unable to supply because for whatever reason their offices are closed. So it's made us come back and say, well, you know what, we need to make sure that we've got that support, and that software company is now local, and we're doing that right at the moment, changing some of our job management systems to being localised so that we can have that network of support. I think it really has been about people looking in their business a lot closer, a lot harder, and saying, well, you know what can we do differently? How can we improve? How can we pull this apart and make people work differently, perform differently, use technology, innovate what we do? So I think there's some very positives that have come out of this whole situation.
Great. Before I go to you, just a reminder, if anyone wanted to send in out there any questions, please send them in now because we're running out of time. Mike, silver linings.
I think the silver lining that's obvious here in Queensland is that it's provided new ways of working. There's many of us working from home. It's given us an opportunity to reflect on how we work. It's shown that those long days in the office and the commutes weren't as essential as what we thought they were. And the majority of the workforce believe that they're reasonably well equipped to work from home. I think that businesses are discovering the benefits of a workforce that can work anywhere, anytime. And as offices begin to open again, I think that businesses and employees alike will reassess how they work. Flexible working will become a critical factor in hiring, like we're talking about before, and keeping top talent and flexible working culture, less office space and more money saved. If you drove around the Brisbane CBD and in the city area, you realise how busy the sign writers have been. We have 4 lease signs everywhere. I think a lot of the organisations that have moved out of their office space won't want all that office space to go back to. I think we've got to prepare for the time ahead. As we come out of this pandemic, the long-term strategies that we put in place now are going to be critical to continuing long-term success of businesses. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an important time to be looking at our business strategies to see, and just being able to slow down and match the slowness of the industry in terms of costs. Brian, what are some of the silver linings do you see from this very disruptive period?
Well, I've actually worked from home for almost 10 years, but I do travel a lot. And the one silver lining out of this is that I've actually adopted and made change to video link meetings. I've always had the impression that, face-to-face is by far the best. And obviously I go to a lot of sites, but even with meetings for ACRA, the applicator technical group, instead of actually meeting in a boardroom, it's great to be able to see someone and do it over on the computer. But Lorraine also picked up a little, or made a mention there about, with the future, it is a good time to market. It's a good time that a lot of the engineers are at home at the moment. They actually have that little bit more time for you because they don't have those distractions. So they're giving me more time, which is great. But it is a good time to start looking outside the box as well for the future.
Great. And Grahame, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, look, this too will pass. It's just a matter of how long it takes to pass. Out of it, I think all the businesses will be stronger because they've adopted better ways of working and flexible life balances. The worry, I suppose, is the I can't remember the phrase you used earlier, Caroline, the valley of death. What happens with the commercial sector with all of these properties that are no longer utilised the way they were last year? And the retail seems to bounce back very quickly. Our social habits out in the restaurants and cafes of the world, there's a hell of a lot of money that runs through those normally. Maybe it won't be so social. Live music, if you're into that, that's taken a hell of a hit. So there's all these artists have got to find alternate ways to do things, and the kiddies of today, they'll have to find other ways to get into the mosh pit.
I'm sure they'll work it out.
Yeah.
I think we're sort of running out of time now. Grahame, well, thank you everyone for your time today. That was amazing. We've got probably 1 more minute for a question if there is one from the audience. That's Grahame. Did you want to
nominate Alan Bird for a question? I'm sure Alan could ask a question. Maybe. We'll wait. No, I'd like to thank the panellists and Caroline, if there are no questions that come in the meantime. Thanks everybody for putting the time into the panel, and Caroline for moderating it so well again. Do a great job, appreciate it. I should also take a mention to shout out our Secretary, Nicole Raymond, had a birthday recently, a fairly substantial one as well. We did sing happy
21.
birthday. It's 21, yeah, or a permutation of. I think we could come up with some.
There she is.
Hey.
Where are you, Nick? Come on, show your face.
This is it.
Yeah. Well, should we sing happy birthday? This would be an unusual thing.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Why not?
I think you have to kick it with Grahame.
Okay. Oh, maybe we shouldn't, because Nick will take it out of us later. But happy birthday, Nick. We do appreciate all the work that you do.
Yes, mate.
I won't declare the milestone, but it's a pretty impressive one. Well done.
I'm glad I made it.
That's it. There's a fair bit of downhill after this, so enjoy the rest of the trip. That's what I'd suggest. So sorry for that aside. Alan hasn't taken up the opportunity to ask a question. Or have you, Alan? Let me have a look. Nope. That's all right. We'll catch you next time. Okay, I think in closing, I've got some notes here which I've misplaced momentarily. That's about it. The recording of the panel will be on the website on ACRA TV with, as Nick calls the YouTube these days. So keep an eye out for the link there. Pardon me. And also we are happy to take suggestions on other webinar topics. So please feed them in through Nick, and we will do our best to fulfill those because as Brian mentioned, this mode is very effective. It's very efficient for everybody to get onto the webinars. There's so much less mucking around with travel. Of course, the penalty there is we don't get to socialise and wave elbows at each other, but we can do that remotely, I guess. So thank you again, everybody. Play safe, give regard to your neighbours and friends, due social distancing, and we'll get through this stronger and better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.